And welcome to the USA Today Network's live coverage of the state of the state in New Jersey. I'm staff writer Ashley Balzerzak, and I'm here with Charles Stile, our political columnist. Welcome.
Welcome. Good to see you, Ashley.
Good to see you too. So Charlie, what are you looking forward to seeing with Governor Phil Murphy's address today?
Well, given 2021 is a campaign year, he's running for re-election. I'm expecting this speech to be a big campaign, de facto campaign kickoff speech. I'm expecting gallons of gloss that he's going to pour on his record. He's going to accentuate the positive, which is all governors do to a degree with the state of the state. But given that this is an election year, I think we're going to see a lot of that. I think I'm curious to see how he will turn some of the challenges to his administration. Obviously, things like the way the vaccinations have been, the frustration that's been mounting over the way vaccinations have rolled out, the questions over the handling of the nursing home debacle, and let's see how he manages that. But I'm expecting him to really just keep an eye on the horizon and be positive and focus less on the negative and on those issues. And if he touches on them at all, he's going to roll them in probably the most positive way possible.
What are some of the positives you think that you'll hear from him? Our colleague Dustin Rasiopi did a great preview of this, of all of the promises that he's managed to keep, but some asterisks there. Can you kind of walk through some of his policy wins for us?
Well, yeah, he's going to take things like the most recent one, which is the assigning of this $14 billion in tax incentives, which was a source of very heated controversy, political conflict between his allies in South Jersey and Senate President Steve Sweeney. And I think you're going to see him frame that as a big economic development win for the state, when in fact, on balance, I think it's a pretty much a negligible victory for Murphy, and a win for the status quo. Ultimately, they got $14 billion spread out over 5 years. You can correct me on the number, but it really, with some modifications to the plan, and I think they're important modifications, this is really maintaining the program the way it essentially was reconstructed. So you're going to see things like that, for example. That's going to be a big one.
Yeah. What about one of the things he's really talked about each year was the millionaire's tax. So he finally got that through.
Yes.
Minimum wage, paid family leave, maybe those will be.
Yeah, he got some of the low-hanging fruit of issues that were waiting for him. They were all queued up for him when he came into office. But the big victory for him was after 3 times at the plate, he got his the millionaire's tax. Mm-hmm. And he's packages that as a big win for progressive governance, progressive values. It's going to help finance change. But again, he achieved that by actually negotiating within the current political structure, the way that he inherited. So he didn't really change that. He's going to portray himself as a kind of a change agent. But what we're going to really see from Murphy is that he's been able to move the needle slightly to the left by playing within the boundaries that have always existed in Trenton.
Mm-hmm. What does the upcoming campaign season look like? Who's he up against? Are there any primary challenges? What do you kind of see as his competitors?
He's done he doesn't face any primary challenge right now, and his field, the Republican field, just got narrower last night with the sudden abrupt departure of Doug Steinhardt, who was a former state Republican chairman who entered the field as the unabashed Trumpian. I mean, he lashed himself to the hip of Donald Trump, and made that his calling card. And after last week's events, I guess the impression that he let in his that comes across in his announcement from last night is that really not only harmed his brand, but may have harmed his own business. He only has a big statewide law firm with statewide presence. And I think the implication was that this was going to really hurt his personal bottom line. And he had a very limited chance of winning, frankly, in a state where Donald Trump is widely disliked. And he captured 42% of the vote, not much of a difference from 2016. There was very little chance, very little path for Doug Steinhardt to win as a Trumpian. His main opponent was Jack Ciattarelli, a former assemblyman from Somerset County, who ran in 2017 as a kind of anti-Trump establishment Republican centrist, but he's kind of had to contort himself into more of a sympathetic, into a qualified Trumpian, if you will. I don't like the man's behavior and conduct, but there are some policies I like. And he's really had to thread the needle. And I think the Democratic committee is going to paint him, Democratic State Committee and Murphy's team are going to paint him as a closet Trumpian, maybe not even a closet Trumpian, and a sort of a milder version of Doug Steinhardt. So he's really, Murphy is, he has a unified Democratic Party behind him, which he didn't have his first year in office. In the first year in office, he looked like a deer in the headlights with the party fractured and very few allies in the legislature. That has all changed almost to 180 degrees now. And he has very little competition that's out there. Ciattarelli is going to have to move more to the middle. And if he does a capable job of that, I think he'll have a decent competition in the fall, but it's a long way off.
So for those tuning in, State of the State coming up about 1 o'clock. So Charlie, can you kind of walk us through how this year is going to be a little bit different than normal years? For instance, it has already been taped. How has the coronavirus kind of changed the way this would normally play out each year?
Oh, well, the coronavirus is dominating everything. It permeates every policy decision, every comment. And what's most interesting is that Phil Murphy, before the COVID crisis, he was still a kind of an unknown quantity to most of the public. But unlike, say, Donald Trump, he actually seized the moment and became a day-to-day crisis commander in the eyes of the public. He, following the playbook of Chris Christie, he turned to YouTube and on a daily basis was communicating directly to the public. He was going over the gatekeepers, the press in Trenton and the media in the New York, Philadelphia metropolitan areas, and speaking directly, unfiltered, and empathetically. And it became the daily Phil Murphy show, and it worked. It worked because it created a sense that somebody was in control and that we were getting some sort of roadmap as to where we were going. And it gave him a wide berth. People were able to say, kind of look at Phil Murphy and say, you know what, he is sort of entering uncharted territory. They gave him some latitude from mistakes, including the nursing home and the veteran homes debacles. But I think this transformed Phil Murphy and filled the vacuum in the minds of a lot of voters. Like, who was Phil Murphy? Well, here he is. Here's a guy who's actually someone who's in charge, and he's in the pulpit there in Trenton. So I think what we're going to see with him is he'll play that theme constantly on the campaign trail, showing solidarity with the public. We're all in this together. We're fighting this together. And that solidarity, I think, really helped boost, instill confidence in people. And he's going to play that aggressively.
That makes sense. For viewers watching, the speech will start at 1 o'clock, hopefully, and then we'll play the speech. And after that, we'll have other reporters from across the network coming in to kind of talk about what we've seen. We'll have people talking about marijuana, health, nursing homes, that sort of thing. So
transit too.
Yeah. So please stay on, watch that. Charlie, you brought up nursing homes while we're waiting here. What are some of the things that you wish Murphy would talk about, but he probably won't? You were kind of talking about some of the things that went wrong or flubs or things that Republicans may really grasp onto. What are some of the upcoming or things that have already happened that you wish Murphy would kind of be more direct about and answer for?
Well, I think, Scott Fallon's and Lindy Washburn's superb reporting have touched, really unearthed a lot of very troubling questions. And I think Scott's story recently about the directive that came down to basically discourage or even discipline people for wearing masks early on, when there was a directive from the CDC urging mask wearing. There was that, to me, needs a lot of explanation. And to me, that story seems to be wrapped in the whole fog of confusion about the opening days, about the pandemic. I think he needs to really candidly walk through that. I'll tell you the truth, I'm not sure we're going to get that kind of candor in an election year. I think you're going to get if ever cornered, you're going to get a kind of a limited, kind of glossed over defense. I don't think you're going to get much pressure from the Democratic legislature. I thought maybe in a year or two earlier, because they were at such odds with each other, that it was so fractious, that the Senate under Steve Sweeney would have waged an aggressive bipartisan examination. I don't see that coming. And, we're kind of just leaving it to the Republican attacks during the campaign. And that has limited shelf, and that has limited ability.
Yeah. At least from the readers that send me emails, the thing that really stands out for me is the problems with unemployment. There are still tens of thousands. We don't know how many people who haven't gotten their full payments here. So I doubt Murphy will talk about that, but that's something that I know readers really are caring about and would like to see something fixed. You saw computer issues, people not being able to get any help from claims agents. So that would be something I think you'll hear Republicans really talk about a lot, and maybe we won't hear that much from Murphy. Just wanted to let you guys know it's about 1 minute until the speech is scheduled to start, but Charlie and I are still here, so please keep tuning in. We'll have great reporters from across the network. Mike Davis, who covers the marijuana legislation. That's another thing we'll probably hear Murphy talk about. Voters voted to legalize marijuana for people over 21, but the legislature still hasn't gotten its act together on enabling legislation. So we're kind of in this middle ground that Mike can really tell us about. We'll have Scott Fallon, Lindy Washburn. We'll have Colleen Wilson talk about transportation. So we've really got a great group of reporters ahead of us. So please let us know if you have any questions. Tweet at us, Facebook, whatever. Do you have anything else you want to add, Charlie, as we wait for Murphy?
Well, no, he's big on this shared pain theme. I think he's also, I'm interested also that he's going to, without saying it bluntly, make the case for big government. Big government works, liberal government works. We won't use the liberal word, God forbid. Progressive is a safer word, but I don't even think he'll use that. I think he's going to show that a lot of things like expanded childcare, medical leave, minimum wage, all these things that were queued up for him and that he enacted in his early days are now sort of laying the floor plan for not only for lower class and middle class people, but actually now served as a sort of safety net, additional safety net during the COVID crisis. Mm-hmm. And this is coming after 8 years of sort of this smarter, tougher, austere government of Chris Christie. He wants to show that the pivot 180 degrees the other way was a big success. That's going to be a theme, I think, in this speech.
Sorry to cut you off, Charlie, but it looks like the speech is about to start.
He's on his way. Very good.
Over, yeah. See you on the other side.
All right.
Chief Operating Officer at Misfits Market, direct-consumer online grocer of produce and pantry items. We deliver right to people's doorsteps with a mission to reduce food waste in the country. In this fulfillment center alone, we have just over 1,000 employees.
My name is Monica Martinez Milan, and I'm the owner of Stumpy's Hatchet House, based out of Greenbrook, New Jersey, in Somerset County. We're a place where people can come and throw hatchets, let go, release some stress, some energy. Just a place where you can come in and forget about your, anxiety or whatever it is that you're dealing with in the day for an hour or two.
My name is Tawanda Taylor, and I am a Trenton Public School teacher. I teach at the same school that I attended as a little girl.
Lighter or heavier.
My name is Maritza Benitez. I am an emergency room nurse here at University Hospital. We're all born to do something. I've always wanted to be a nurse. When this pandemic hit, it was like block after block was on fire. I wanted to stay here and defend this house, right, against this invisible enemy, because it was my coworkers, it was my community that was burning.
The pandemic dramatically impacted us in numerous different ways. We told people, hey, listen, we're here if you want to work, and we understand if you can't, but we'll be here when you're ready.
We did proactively close in March and reopened in July. I didn't want to just sit at home and worry. I wanted to help. Like, how could I help?
My son lost his father, Rodney Dickerson, on April 21st, 2020, and he lost him to COVID. So this has hit home. Not only am I teaching, I'm also experiencing grief along with my son. Some of my students are experiencing some grief.
19. I love that you want to count. I have super learners in our class.
I want to give back. I want to give back those students. And it's our duty. It's our duty and obligation to help each generation.
Bye. Bye, friends. Bye, friends.
When I found out that there was a vaccine, I was overjoyed. I just couldn't wait for it to hit so that we can put an end to this, right? Because that's what it was really about.
Yeah.
The vaccine, just levels the playing field so that we can return back to some form of normalcy, right? That kids can go to school, stores can be open.
We can't be isolated. Being part of a community has helped keep me in a really good, positive state.
South Jersey has some of the best talent around. It's only going to go up from here. I think some good things are going to happen in the next year or two.
I believe that we are going to do well, and I believe that 2021 is definitely going to be a different year than 2020.
We all of us have to lead together. And that is going to be a great word with a T, together.
Hang in there, because help is coming. Help is coming. I have faith. I'm a woman of faith, and if you don't have any, I have enough for you. I have faith. We're going to see the end of this. Just hang in there.
My fellow New Jerseyans, I don't need to tell you these are different times, so this is a different kind of speech. Instead of delivering this address in a crowded state house, I'm standing in an empty theater. Yet for all the changes, the most important things remain constant. Our values, our priorities, our vision, and that we are all New Jerseyans. The stories we just heard have echoed across our state for the better part of the past year. They are stories that show our grit and reveal our heart. They echo the pain of 2020 and they preview the hope of 2021. They are tied with a common thread that we are all in this together. Most of all, these New Jerseyans reflect the state of our state. Although deeply wounded, we enter 2021 tougher than ever, wiser than before, and ready to move forward together. We have lived this truth together, that New Jersey was one of the first and hardest hit states, that our communities of color have been disproportionately impacted, and that we are currently battling a second wave, which is just as brutal as the first. Every single day, as we have for nearly a year, we face the challenge head on. Every single day, we wrestle with the tough yet necessary decisions, and we know there are more to come, the right decisions for the long-term public health and vitality of our families. We weigh every pro and con to ensure that every decision is not only effective, but equitable. And in typical Jersey style, we are leveling with each other and making sure that no one is left behind. We are facing this pandemic not with a dismissive wave or partisan pandering, but with a full-scale counterattack. We are making the fight against COVID-19 one that engages every New Jerseyan. 3 years ago, I took office with a pledge to rebuild New Jersey from the middle out and from the bottom up, to change the way Trenton works, not simply for the sake of change, but for the sake of people, to put working and middle-class families first. And that mission is now even more urgent. Over these 3 years, we have laid a foundation to support a stronger and fairer New Jersey that works for every family. These were the right things to do before the pandemic, and they turned out to be some of the best decisions to get us through the pandemic. Raising the minimum wage, passing earned sick leave, and expanding paid family and medical leave, making those at the very top pay their fair share with a millionaire's tax, while at the same time cutting taxes for working families with either a larger earned income tax credit or a direct rebate, or both. Protecting healthcare from attacks from Washington and reducing premiums for hundreds of thousands of New Jerseyans. Expanding pre-K education, making record investments in public education, while at the same time stabilizing property taxes. Making community college tuition free for thousands of New Jerseyans and expanding job training programs. These are real accomplishments that help people across our state. We made these strides by working with the people of New Jersey and with my partners in the legislature, especially Senate President Steve Sweeney and Speaker of the General Assembly, Craig Coughlin, and their colleagues on both sides of the aisle. Together, we will continue moving forward, grounded in our shared everyday reality, yet propelled by our optimism about tomorrow. We all sense the promise that comes from the arrival of approved, safe, and effective COVID vaccines. Through the tremendous work of Health Commissioner Judy Persicelli and her team of medical and scientific experts, and despite many obstacles, we have in place a plan to vaccinate every willing New Jerseyan adult resident, and hundreds of thousands have already rolled up their sleeves. 6 vaccine megasites are opening across the state, and vaccinations will be available in hundreds more places statewide. We've already streamlined the vaccination process to enhance efficiency and ensure that if you choose to receive your first vaccine dose, you'll get the proper follow-up shot. I hope you'll take a moment to visit covid19.nj.gov/vaccine to learn about the safety and effectiveness of the vaccines available to us. And by the way, you can pre-register for your own vaccination. And as our statewide vaccination program continues to grow, we will begin to see the light on the horizon get a little bit brighter. Be assured, we will get back to being able to gather and celebrate with our families and friends. We will be able to see all our children back in the schools they love. We will see our economy recover and flourish. You've heard me say that public health creates economic health. Our commitment to this ideal is unwavering. The pandemic has slammed small businesses across America, so our economic focus has been squarely where it should be, on helping our hard-hit small businesses and encouraging new ones to grow. We have been consistent in our decisions and have protected businesses, especially, by the way, restaurants, from the revolving door of openings and closings that have occurred in so many places across America. Through the New Jersey Economic Development Authority, nearly 55,000 small businesses, by the way, many of them owned by women, people of color, and veterans, have received a truly life-saving grant or a loan, and some of our nascent startups have received guarantees for vital new capital. These proactive steps have allowed businesses to keep employees on the payroll and to pay their bills. Their determination, creativity, and plain old hard work, and that of the people who work with them, has been extraordinary and inspiring. Our small business community is the backbone, not only of our local economies, but of our state's economy. These are the shops and restaurants that turn a town into a community. This is why I am so excited about the prospects for the new business and job-creating recovery plan that I signed 5 days ago, a package which I was proud to work on alongside numerous lawmakers, progressive advocates, private sector leaders, union leaders, tech entrepreneurs, and indeed small business owners. Long before I became governor, I called for sweeping and fundamental reforms to our incentive system. The old ways worked for too few and left too many behind. So we set out to create a new system that is transparent and fair, which focuses not on huge corporations, but on job-creating small businesses and innovative startups. A system that most of all promotes good-paying, future-focused jobs. A system that has sensible caps in spending and an inspector general to safeguard every penny of taxpayer money. We set out to lift up the New Jersey-based innovative companies of tomorrow through a venture fund encouraging public-private investments. And by the way, there is no other fund like it in America. We set out to turn brownfields and other long neglected areas into new, walkable, and inviting communities. We set out to ensure workforce and affordable housing options and to eliminate food deserts. We set out to create the state's first historic preservation tax credit so our future can be built by repurposing the buildings that made us an economic power in the first place. And we set out to ensure our incentives come with strong protection for our union workers. Everything I just mentioned, everything we initially set out to do, is now reflected in our groundbreaking new incentives program. This is what change looks like. This is what putting people ahead of the powerful looks like. This is what focusing on Main Street looks like. This is what protecting today and planning for tomorrow looks like. The current economic emergency is something we haven't faced since the Great Depression 90 years ago. And the old ways of doing business weren't going to build us back stronger or more resilient. New Jersey now has a new model that sets the standard for inclusive and statewide economic growth and job creation. Growth powered by women, minority, and veteran-owned small businesses, by innovative entrepreneurs, and by those whose vision for the future preserves our history. And as New Jersey starts getting back to work, commuters will find that NJ Transit is safer and more accountable. We proved the naysayers wrong by beating the deadline for federally mandated train safety technology, completing 11 years worth of work in less than 3. As a new Portal Bridge rises along the Northeast Corridor, they'll see our efforts to eliminate one of its most frustrating choke points. This new commuter rail bridge will not only improve the commutes for hundreds of thousands of New Jerseyans, but it will also stimulate local economies and provide thousands of new union jobs. Commuters will also see our efforts in the hiring and training of multiple classes of the new rail engineers we need to ensure on-time operations. We inherited a system with depleted ranks, and to date, I'm proud to say we've added 94 new engineers with another 82 in training. And when President-elect Joe Biden takes office next week, we're going to begin working alongside him and his team to see the full Gateway program fulfilled, including the new tunnels under the Hudson River. We are leaving for the next generation a rail system wholly different than the one we inherited. We are making historic investments in our roads and bridges. We are reimagining our airports and seaports. Put that together, we are embarking on the largest infrastructure investment program in the history of our state. These transformative investments will reap tremendous returns for our economy, create good-paying New Jersey jobs, and attract new and innovative companies to the state that want a world-class infrastructure system. And to ensure these infrastructure investments live up to their promises, we're demanding new levels of transparency and accountability. This commitment to transparency and honesty must be a standard we set across the whole of government. Just as we can't go back to economic policies that put the wealthy and the well-connected first, we can't lean on the broken politics that put special interests first. Last year, I was proud to propose the first comprehensive set of ethics reform in a decade, with bipartisan support, I might add, and I remain committed to them. New Jerseyans need to know, not just believe, that their government has their backs. With all the turmoil in Washington, let's set New Jersey as an example for moving forward. This is how our future will be powered, by bold ideas, real oversight, and a commitment to the task at hand. It will also be powered by clean energy, using our natural resources and talent pool to reach our goal of a 100% clean energy economy by the year 2050. Just this year, we cemented our place as the country's leader in offshore wind, announcing in South Jersey both the New Jersey Wind Port and a new manufacturing facility at the Paulsboro Marine Terminal. These key first investments in offshore wind manufacturing will bring up to 2,000 good-paying union jobs to our state, along with hundreds of millions of dollars in new investments, and make us the nation's offshore wind energy leader. The clean energy economy is a once-in-a-generation opportunity. So we're bringing together stakeholders to assess our needs and to develop a robust and equitable green jobs workforce development strategy. Our strategy will ensure that these new jobs are developed and designed equitably, centering labor unions, environmental justice advocates, people of color, and women, so that our green economy is as diverse and dynamic as New Jersey. And as the first state in the nation to incorporate climate change through our K through 12 education standards, we're laying the groundwork for tomorrow's workforce. Now, just as public health creates economic health, an inclusive and equitable economy must mean healthier families and safer communities. Perhaps one of the best examples of this principle at work is our effort to make our overall healthcare system more transparent, more accessible, and more affordable. We ended the drama of unexpected costs by prohibiting surprise medical bills. We created the Office of Healthcare Affordability and Transparency to empower consumers. In the midst of the pandemic, we're making sure people are not saddled with unfair expenses for COVID tests and that they have access to their provider via telemedicine. We are putting government to work to keep costs in check. And because we took the initiative to open our new state-run healthcare exchange, right now, hundreds of thousands of New Jerseyans are purchasing healthcare at premiums cheaper than when the Affordable Care Act first came online in 2014. After years of willful neglect, we are funding women's healthcare and family planning services. And no matter what happens in Washington, we are working to protect a woman's full reproductive rights as a matter of state law. At the same time, we also haven't lost sight of the maternal and infant health crisis that threaten the lives of our mothers and babies, especially mothers and babies of color, long before the COVID-19 pandemic. No mother should ever endure the pain of losing her baby, and no child should ever feel the deep loss of growing up without a mother. From day one, this belief has driven the First Lady, our administration, and countless stakeholders to implement immediate solutions. We are determined to make New Jersey the safest place in the nation to deliver and raise a baby. And as we're fighting the coronavirus pandemic, we're keeping our focus on fighting the opioid epidemic. We are working to improve our healthcare system because we know that a healthier New Jersey is a stronger New Jersey. And a stronger New Jersey is one that ensures and protects justice for all. A fairer New Jersey recognizes the powerful truth of the words, Black Lives Matter. We are attacking and ripping up the root causes of centuries of systemic racism. Given the national moment, we can, indeed we must, choose to make our state a model for moving forward. And there is no more important step than reforming the way our communities and law enforcement work together. That's why we're implementing the first broad-scale reforms to our state's use of force policy in a generation. We're making our justice system more transparent and fair, not just for our sake, but to make New Jersey a national model for positive transformation in policing and ending racial inequities. And I also remain committed to eliminating mandatory minimum sentences for nonviolent drug and property crimes. These reforms are long overdue. As the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. noted, and I quote him, "Justice delayed is justice denied." We must get this done. Together with the legislature, we are on the verge of passing an innovative and groundbreaking set of laws to reform our historically unjust approach to marijuana and cannabis. 2 months ago, you all voted overwhelmingly to legalize adult use marijuana and begin the process of ending the racial imbalance that disproportionately penalizes Black and brown people arrested for marijuana offenses. We're setting up a cannabis industry that will promote the growth of new small businesses, many of which will be owned by women, minorities, and veterans. This hasn't been an easy fight, nor has it happened as quickly as I would have liked, but we are in a better place, a smarter place, and a more just place than ever before. We will continue to strengthen New Jersey's position as the best place in America to raise a family. And to do this, we are building a future where housing is more affordable and accessible for everyone. As the pandemic literally hit people where they live, we instituted strong prohibitions against evictions and utility cutoffs to protect our families. We provided rental assistance to nearly 20,000 individuals and families facing immediate challenges. And I once again urge the legislature to send to my desk legislation to give impacted renters up to 30 months to make up for back rent. We worked with our mortgage lenders to provide sensible and fair forbearance programs for homeowners struggling under the weight of COVID's economic uncertainties. And we will continue to provide assistance to those who face eviction or foreclosure and support for those who can't make rent or mortgage payments due to COVID. Yet many of our fellow residents were struggling before COVID and will continue to struggle without our help. Through the work of Lieutenant Governor Sheila Oliver, we are taking much needed steps to expand opportunities for safe and affordable housing. This means making more down payment assistance available to would-be homebuyers, building more affordable housing units, and battling homelessness. In a time when rights are being rolled back and progress threatened, we're putting the country on notice with the nation's strongest laws for environmental justice, for combating senseless gun violence, for upholding the rights and dignity of our LGBTQ plus community, and for welcoming our immigrant communities into our inclusive and diverse family. And we are ensuring these broad and diverse voices are heard and honored. Across the nation, we have seen multiple attempts by some to diminish our democratic institutions, to try to turn baseless conspiracy theories into the basis for court challenges, and to silence the voices and throw out the votes of many Americans. We were all shocked to witness a mob incited and supported by politicians at the highest levels of government shamefully try to invalidate the votes of 158 million Americans through insurrection. The way to combat this contagion in our democracy is to further strengthen that very democracy. One way to fight back is to do what I was sent here to do: give more power back to the people by expanding democracy. We know that our democracy works best when more people, not fewer, are given access to the ballot box. And through our efforts and those of local and county officials and election workers, more New Jerseyans cast a ballot in the year 2020 than in any other year in our state's long and storied history. Now it's time to take the next step, and I'm already working with the legislature to enact a true in-person early voting law, among other measures, to further open up our democracy. Regardless of your party affiliation, your vote is your voice, and this country is better off when more of us are heard. So these are all important for our shared future, but perhaps nothing will have the long-term impact as upholding New Jersey's reputation for having the best public schools in America. We know we have room to do better and to bring more schools, more students, and more communities under that banner. Just as the pandemic has been a stress test on the fabric of our state, nowhere is this more true than within our schools. It has put an enormous strain on students, on parents, and on educators and school leaders. None of this has been easy. I say that as your governor and as a parent. And I also say from the bottom of my heart, thank you for all that you are doing. The digital divide was real long before COVID hit our state, but it became even clearer as the pandemic took hold. In 2021, no child should be denied access to all the exceptional educational opportunities of the online world. An estimated 230,000 plus students, almost entirely, by the way, from disadvantaged households, lacked either the laptops or internet accessibility or both for remote learning. So we got to work closing that digital divide. And today, 95% of those students have the tools they need, and we're close to getting the outstanding gap to zero. I wish I could tell you that no child is falling behind in this disruptive school year, but I can't. That is why our focus must turn to ensuring our students have the academic and social emotional support needed as they rebound from the stresses of the pandemic. We've already begun to direct funding to school districts that need the most help in getting students back on track. So please know this: we are the #1 state for public education precisely because of our strong support for attending to the educational, social, and emotional needs of our entire education community. We won't let our students or our educators down now. That effort matters today, and it will pay further dividends as we move forward to close the remaining educational gaps among our students, such as by protecting school funding and expanding access to pre-K. By the way, one of the smartest investments we can make. Since we took office, working with Senate President Steve Sweeney and Speaker Craig Coughlin, we have added more than $750 million in direct classroom funding, and we've protected this investment despite the pandemic's fiscal impacts. This has been good news for our educational communities and our property taxpayers. As we've noted before, the pandemic further exposed every existing fault line in our society. And nowhere has that been more clear than in the balancing act between work and family. As COVID-19 raged, we made childcare more affordable for countless families, especially our essential workers who face the impossible task of serving their community in a time of crisis while caring for their children. But in truth, this wasn't a new problem. Working families needed help in covering the cost of childcare before the pandemic, and they will continue to need support after. Let's be very clear. Even in the year 2021, these burdens too often fall on women. When schools and work are both remote, it is women who bear the uneven load of providing childcare, continuing to perform in the workplace, and managing immeasurable other demands, both seen and unseen. I see this tug of war again and again, mothers struggling to be fully present at work and as parents. This is one fundamental reason why we created our state's child and dependent tax credit 3 years ago. We cannot afford to miss out on the contributions of half our population. Harnessing the full economic power of all of our people requires providing real affordable options for childcare that work for all families. We remain committed to easing the burden of working parents, especially moms, and creating an even more robust childcare support system. With more New Jerseyans facing food insecurity because of the pandemic's impacts, we doubled down on our commitment to the food banks, helping families to put food on their tables. And we continued our commitment to put a college education within reach of all who want it, and have made a community college education tuition-free for students from families with incomes under $65,000. And there are good options for further education and training beyond traditional college. And we continue creating exciting public-private partnerships to train more people for the jobs of the future, with a particular emphasis on good-paying union jobs. At every point in this difficult year, the grace, ingenuity, and compassion shown by so many have brightened some dark days. That is the light as we begin this new year. Better days are coming. In 2020, the pandemic touched every corner of our lives and challenged every state. Some chose to deny COVID. We chose to fight it. We told the hard truths, made the hard choices, and never played partisan politics with people's lives. Yet some in New Jersey are suggesting the same old failed policies of decades past. They forget that after the last economic downturn, the prior administration cut taxes for millionaires, cut vital programs, left middle and working class residents behind, and as a result, we had the slowest recovery of any state in the nation. Our long-standing inequities have never been felt more sharply than during the past 10 months. To blunt them, we must accept the fact that we can't grow and strengthen the middle class by pulling the rug out from under it, and that we can't cut and slash our way to growth and opportunity. We're proving that the best way to beat COVID is by leaning in to smart investments and forward-looking, principled ideas. There's no excuse for doing less or leaving more behind. Everything together shows the promise of the new post-COVID day that is just beginning to dawn. It's a day we will enter not fearing what's next, but knowing where we're heading. And that direction is forward. 12 days ago, we welcomed a new year. But while the calendar has changed, our mission has not. When I first asked for the privilege to serve as your governor, I pledged to do what was right, not for my next election, but for the next generation. And that is how we have governed. We are who we said we would be. We stand with New Jersey's hardworking, middle-class families and everyone working to get there. We haven't sugarcoated our problems, and we haven't followed the same old Trenton playbook of kicking them down the road for someone else to deal with. A year ago, we had no idea of what 2020 would throw at us. As the poet Langston Hughes wrote, and I quote him, "A dream deferred is a dream denied." And for so many, 2020 was a year of deferred dreams. But we stuck together, even in the darkest of days, as the New Jersey family we are. Out of shared pain, we forged shared purpose. Because of all we did together here in New Jersey, 2021 can be the year where dreams are once again possible and the wind is at our back. So when we emerge from the darkness of the pandemic together, we will be stronger, fairer, and more resilient than before. And we will be prepared to move forward as one state and one family. After all, this is New Jersey. No state has our character, our backbone, our attitude, our fight. We've always fought because we've always been the underdog. We've been counted out over and over again, but we've never been bowed, and we've never, ever failed. May God bless you and your family with a healthy new year, and may God continue to bless the great state of New Jersey and the United States of America.
Welcome back, everyone. This is staff writer Ashley Balzerzak with my co-host, political columnist Charles Stile. So Charlie, what did you think of Governor Murphy's State of the State address that we just watched?
Well, certainly all the buckets of gloss, positive gloss for a re-election governor came out as expected. But I thought the theme that really stayed with me is this promise of a post-COVID future. I think that's going to be his big calling card. It was the theme of this whole speech. And I think what he's really banking on, without saying it as much, is that the vaccinations will fan out deeper into the public. We may get closer to herd immunity. And once that happens, the economy will kind of start to pick up. And he will be at the head of the parade as the sitting governor, the incumbent, who will be enjoying all these political benefits that will come his way. Of course, the big question is right now that seems like light years away, given the way the slow, stumbling rollout of the vaccinations have occurred so far.
So kind of going off of that, was there anything that the governor said that kind of made you like puzzled, your head a little bit, didn't seem quite right? Or
I mean, the ethics reform, every governor comes to the State of the State with an ethics reform package, and you know better than most of us, Ashley, because you drill into this. It's really just a talking point. It's to give this big broad brush of this aura of transparency. And ultimately, I know Chris Christie did this. He came up with a big ethics reform plan, never went anywhere. I think he even mentioned this in his speech last year, and he's just sort of exhumed it for this one. And so I that made me cringe. Also, the whole thing about the tax incentive program, he kind of spun it as this, we've really reformed it into a small business program. It's a $14 billion program that was saluted by the very people that created its predecessor and the one that Murphy tried to dismantle and attack. So, that's for starters.
Yeah, I agree. Both of those issues kind of made me raise an ear.
Right.
In terms of the transparency. Yeah, he put out this package last year, 5 bills that were basically supposed to help the public know more about their lawmakers, so understanding where they're getting their money. And one of the ones that really kind of stuck out to me was having a bill, the language out there so the public can read it for a few days before the legislature can vote on it. And when you're talking about that tax incentive bill, that $14.5 billion bill over 7 years, that was rushed through. I think it was a couple hundred pages. The day that they voted on it, there were hundreds of pages of amendments that no one had seen. Yeah. You see people on the left and the right putting out editorials saying this isn't how Trenton is supposed to work. So really, really found that interesting. The budget was kind of the same way. So yeah, I agree with you on that. There was also a quote in there that kind of made me chuckle, where he was talking about we're not kicking the can down the road sort of thing, leaving problems for the future. When they passed a budget that included $4 billion worth of borrowing that taxpayers are going to have to pay off with interest. So that's kind of what stood out to me. Is there anything else that you kind of want to dive in deeper or let New Jerseyans know this is important?
Well, I was just, you took that one right out of my pocket there, the $4 billion. Here's the irony: $4 billion bond indebtedness to get us through. He sold it as a necessary emergency step. but that is going to be saddled on, okay, we understand that was a crisis. It was crisis of magnitude of the Depression. So we had to get through this. So that was the selling point for it. But then to wheel around with a $14 billion drain on our coffers over the next 5-6 years through a tax incentive program that, with the exception of some very important to cosmetic to very important changes, is a colossal irony. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah. All right, we are going to add a couple of reporters from across the network. We have the healthcare team coming up. We have Lindy Washburn, our health reporter, and Sue Fallon, our environment reporter. Welcome, both of you.
Thanks.
So we're going to start out with a clip from the speech and then bring it back to discuss. So turning that over.
We have lived this truth together, that New Jersey was one of the first and hardest hit states, that our communities of color have been disproportionately impacted, and that we are currently battling a second wave, which is just as brutal as the first. Every single day, as we have for nearly a year, we face the challenge head on. Every single day, we wrestle with the tough yet necessary decisions, and we know there are more to come, the right decisions for the long-term public health and vitality of our families. We weigh every pro and con to ensure that every decision is not only effective, but equitable. And in typical Jersey style, we are leveling with each other and making sure that no one is left behind.
So Lindy, maybe we'll start with you. What did you take away from the speech and what really drew your attention?
Well, I think the governor really hit hard on the coronavirus, acknowledging that this has completely dominated his past year. And he didn't shy away from using terms like pain or loss or the darkness that we're emerging from. He took a not so subtle swipe at the administration in Washington by mentioning that we're dealing with this with a straight on counterattack. We're not dismissing it with a wave of the hand or pandering to partisan politics, but we're using, and here he repeated his mantra, public health creates economic health. That he emphasized that his decisions are based on science and on data. And I think we've seen this in his daily press conferences or weekly 3 times a week press conferences where he rolls out these numbers every day, to show everyone how the pandemic is going. He used the word equity, underlining how people of color have been disproportionately affected by this, and that is uppermost in mind as various plans are made.
Definitely. What about you, Scott? What kind of stood out to you?
Well, it's an extraordinary time for a lot of reasons, not least of which when in New Jersey history has a governor over the last 10 months made a decision that constantly affects the lives of every New Jerseyan. It's extraordinary the amount of power that this governor has and what he has done with it. And it's only going to continue into 2021. And the vaccination rollout is going to play a key element into his reelection bid. If this doesn't go right, Governor Murphy is going to have some trouble come November. People want to see the death toll go down, the hospitalizations go down. They want to see that restaurants are going to reopen. They want to see that schools will be fully reopened in the fall. If these things don't happen, if there's continued hiccups with the vaccine rollout, that's going to be fodder for his opponents come November.
Yeah, definitely. Did you think the questions that you had about the vaccine rollout or school openings, were any of those details really answered, or was this kind of more a high level discussion?
No, not at all. Not even close. There's a lot of things that you have to drill down into the vaccine rollout. Why doses aren't being used as much? Why isn't there an expansion into other critical groups as other states have done, as the federal government has called for today, as New York has done? There's a number of questions that he's not going to get into at this point and given a state of the state. Hopefully we'll get some answers this week at his daily briefings as it continues, and perhaps we have to wait a little bit longer for those answers.
I think he tried to strike a balance. You know, he tried to be reassuring that we have a plan. We're going to get the vaccine to every adult that wants it. But he didn't, there were things that he'd left out, that we don't have enough supplies, that we don't know exactly how and when we're going to get it to these different groups. And similarly, he tried to reassure people that families will gather together, children will go back to school, the economy will reopen. Right. But when? There's no date affixed to that, and there's no specific plan or benchmarks that are going to lead us to that progress.
Definitely.
Right. I think I agree with you. I think that is the theme you're going to see in play is this. There is this pent up optimism that people want to, if they want to believe those things. And he's going to tease that. He's going to push that button as much as he can. And the challenge will be who's going to come up with a counter narrative other than the press. I don't, he doesn't seem right now to have a unified Republican opposition, a strong candidate right now, and that could change very quickly. But it's going to be hard for the Republicans to push back on that, and that'll be their number one mandate, I think.
The buck is really going to stop with him this year because he doesn't have the Trump administration, or he won't have the Trump administration to fall back on and blame. He's going to have a friendlier, so to speak, Biden administration that he supports quite a bit. So anything that goes wrong with the vaccine rollout from here going forward, it's going to rest on his shoulders.
That's a good point.
So we're going to bring up another clip from the speech. While COVID is obviously top of mind here, there were other healthcare issues that he brought up. So we'll turn to that and then talk to Lindy about what she sees.
We created the Office of Healthcare Affordability and Transparency to empower consumers. In the midst of the pandemic, we're making sure people are not saddled with unfair expenses for COVID tests and that they have access to their provider via telemedicine. We are putting government to work to keep costs in check. And because we took the initiative to open our new state-run healthcare exchange, right now, hundreds of thousands of New Jerseyans are purchasing healthcare at premiums cheaper than when the Affordable Care Act first came online in 2014. After years of willful neglect, we are funding women's healthcare and family planning services. And no matter what happens in Washington, we are working to protect a woman's full reproductive rights as a matter of state law. At the same time, we also haven't lost sight of the maternal and infant health crisis that threaten the lives of our mothers and babies, especially mothers and babies of color, long before the COVID-19 pandemic.
So Lindy, can you tell us about Murphy's other healthcare priorities and how well he's done, what he touched on today?
Well, there's much more to healthcare, obviously, than COVID. And this gave Governor Murphy a chance to really pile on to his favorite enemies, the Trump administration and congressional Republicans, as they've tried to roll back various provisions of the Affordable Care Act. This administration has been successful in holding the line and protecting some of the gains in insurance coverage and in just accessibility of coverage to people who couldn't afford it. They did things like open up a state-based exchange to replace healthcare.gov. So far this year, it's enrolled 220,000 people, 20,000 of them new enrollees, and it still continues to enroll people through the end of this month, an enrollment period which is twice as long as the one that the federal government has. And he emphasized the program that his wife has really spearheaded with the Department of Health to prevent maternal and child mortality, which really disproportionately affects Black families. And these are legitimate gains and programs that have been initiated that kind of have been downplayed or, really lost focus during the coronavirus pandemic. One thing that really leapt out at me, though, was his talk about the opioid crisis. Before there was a COVID pandemic, there was an opioid epidemic that I used to write about a lot. And former Governor Chris Christie almost devoted his entire last State of the State speech to that. Here, it got one sentence in the governor's address, like, hey, we're still focused on it, but no details at all.
That's really interesting. Scott, is there anything that you want to add here? You and Lindy have done some great coverage on the crisis in veterans' homes. Didn't really hear Murphy mention that. Anything that you're hoping that he'll address in the next coming year, or anything you want to leave viewers with?
Yeah, I didn't expect him to really delve into the veterans' homes. It's kind of been a black eye for his administration. But something that his opponents will use against him in 2021. There's no question about that. I also, my other job was covering the environment, and I still dip my toe into that. Really not much on environmental issues. He talked about environmental justice. He talked about climate change and energy goals, but that's all old news. There was nothing that he really said that he's going to do, or anything he outlined that he's going to do in 2021 on the environment front that was very specific at all.
Charlie, I think the lack of talk about the nursing home situation really points to that point that Charlie was making about how this administration is not really held to account by having Democrats in the state house as well as the governor, that they aren't really asking the hard questions. And so it's going to be interesting to see what actually comes of the Attorney General's investigation and other investigations that we know about into what happened at the veterans' homes and other nursing homes in the state.
Well, thank you both very much for joining us today. We are going to now say goodbye to Scott and Lindy and bring on Colleen Wilson, our transportation reporter. Thanks again. Welcome, Colleen.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. So I guess we are going to start with a clip from the speech too, and then have you react to it. So see you in a bit.
There you go.
We created the Office of Healthcare Affordability together with the legislature. We are on the verge of passing an innovative and groundbreaking set of laws to reform our historically unjust.
Well, it looks like we got cut off here, but Colleen, tell us what commuters should care about in Murphy's speech. Any promises made, promises broken, that sort of thing.
I think commuters heard a lot of what they've been hearing for the last 3 years about PTC, about the Portal Bridge, and a little bit about Gateway. And those were things to applaud in the sense that they got done, and they were complicated projects and difficult, challenging, years-long efforts to get a mandated, very behind, very delayed automatic safety braking system installed and tested and certified, at least in a conditional capacity. And then to get some movement from the Trump administration on the Portal Bridge, that was something that Murphy was able to accomplish that his colleague in New York hasn't yet been able to accomplish in the way of Gateway. So they're hoping that is obviously going to have a new path in the Biden administration. I know Murphy has been on the phone with the president-elect and his Secretary of Department of Transportation nominee, Pete Buttigieg, to be in their ear about that project and make sure that it is top of mind for them going forward. But as far as commuters, I think there's a lot to be desired, for them, because their experience just kind of continues to be the status quo of having unreliable, delayed or canceled service, and, not clean vehicles. It just continues to be the same. And I don't think they feel inspired yet about perhaps the foundational changes that could set the stage for bigger, breakthroughs, but we still haven't felt that or seen that yet. And I don't think we know how the governor plans to get there.
I found from the speech, he focused on the big ticket infrastructure items, the positive train control, which really doesn't have that's been a long, an elusive project. Yes, that's important, but it doesn't really help with the day-to-day lunch pail commuting. He's talking about the Portal Bridge and the Gateway project. These are all on the horizon, and he's going to, pat himself on the back for that. But I agree with you. What I was not hearing is any kind of, citing of improved times, quality of service, delays and breakdowns. These are the real issues that I think have marred the reputation of New Jersey Transit and are number one priorities for commuters. And I think this is classic Murphy when you see in his speech. He takes, and frankly, he's not alone on this. This is what other governors do in the state. They take their positives, accentuate it, and blot out the negatives. So, but that issue of, commuter service, I think, is what people really want to hear, and it wasn't delivered in the speech.
There was also a line in there in terms of infrastructure. We're demanding new levels of transparency and accountability. Colleen, what do you think he meant by that? And do you think that that's true?
I'm really not sure exactly what he meant by that. I mean, they did make data available, a little more than a year ago that hadn't been available as far as tracking your trains, cancellations, and delays and things like that. But I think the big things that buttress this idea that there was going to be more transparency and accountability are in that reform legislation he signed almost exactly 3 years ago. But those things were a customer advocate, a chief ethics officer, a more robust board. And we don't have a chief ethics officer, a customer advocate, or 2 board members that he has to appoint. And in fact, kind of went backwards this year in taking away names. And even that, the board that is on there, we've been waiting so long for them, and they're still having problems trying to get documents and communication with the management there. So they're back to the drawing board. I mean, Loretta Weinberg, said recently that the original reform legislation was in part a failure, and that she needs to go back to the drawing board, and the legislature needs to go back and strengthen some of those laws so that the board itself can actually have more documents at their disposal, more flexibility. So I wouldn't say transparency and accountability is, that New Jersey Transit is buttressing that right now.
Is there anything we didn't ask you that you want to add on this, or what you're going to be paying attention to in this next year with the new Biden administration and Democratic majority in the Senate and House?
I mean, I guess I would just say that, I was hoping to hear more, and I will hopefully be following up more on this as to what Murphy's idea of taking New Jersey Transit, which had been behind the 8 ball, struggling to get capital projects and basic state of repair things done, to bending the curve and being what he wants it to be, which is a 21st century pioneering agency. And I want to hear more about what the vision is for that and how they're going to get there, because that's what's going to matter to commuters, is bringing them out of this malaise and into something a little more groundbreaking.
Well, we will follow your coverage and see what happens. Thank you very much for joining us, Colleen. Of course.
Here, Colleen.
We now are going to bring in Mike Davis to talk to you guys about legalized marijuana. How are you doing, Mike?
Hey, Michael.
I think you're muted.
I am muted. Yeah, you'd think after 10 months we'd be used to this, right? No, great to be here. Thanks. Glad to talk to you about this.
Awesome. So I think we've got a clip that we hope will play now, and then we can talk about that and bring it back on.
Together with the legislature, we are on the verge of passing an innovative and groundbreaking set of laws to reform our historically unjust approach to marijuana and cannabis. 2 months ago, you all voted overwhelmingly to legalize adult use marijuana and begin the process of ending the racial imbalance that disproportionately penalizes Black and brown people arrested for marijuana offenses. We're setting up a cannabis industry that will promote the growth of new small businesses, many of which will be owned by women, minorities, and veterans.
So, Mike, I thought that weed was supposed to be legal on January 1st. What is Murphy talking about here?
Yeah, right. So I tend to think that if they had actually passed these bills and marijuana was legal, I think that would have been a pretty big part of this speech, because it's such a big progressive anthem, marijuana legalization. And the fact that this all fell apart the last couple of days is probably not great for the governors. and the communication staff who had to write the speech. Honestly, he talked there for you saw that clip, it was about 15 seconds. It was really only about 30 seconds he talked about marijuana at all in the entire 35, 40-minute speech. And I think that's largely due to the fact that, it's starting to be a little bit of a blemish on his reputation. I mean, just look in the last 2 months. I came on NorthJersey.com, the USA Today network, and we talked about marijuana legalization in the days after Election Day. And there was a big sense of excitement and positivity about the fact that the state did this. And here we are 2 months later, and that has largely evaporated. People look at this process now, and they're pretty skeptical of it, if not downright disappointed.
So what's the latest holdup? I know we have you on here a lot, and it seems to be one issue after another. Why hasn't it been done at this point?
Sure, right? First it was taxes, then it was a cap on the number of cannabis cultivators. The issue now is basically how to enforce these new marijuana laws against underage people. I mean, both minors under 18 and those in that gap between 18 and 21. Essentially, the legislature passed these bills that didn't really have any penalties for those that were under 21 years old, which is interesting because everybody remembers, if you saw the ballot question, it was specifically stated for 21 years and older. So the governor asked for some penalties to be involved there, some fines that wouldn't come with any criminal charge, and specifically for minors, this process of station house adjustments and curbside warnings, essentially getting a warning from the cops saying, you kids shouldn't really be doing drugs at your age. And, going up to, talking to the police department, signing a form that says, I promise I won't do drugs. I'll do some community service, whatever the case might be, just keeping the kids out of the justice system. The legislature cleared some bills that would address this out of committee, and then everything fell apart late last week. A typical Friday afternoon news dump. Now, yesterday, these were supposed to be passed sitting on Murphy's desk, and instead the entire process seems to be back in this stalemate that we've seen over and over again between the legislature and the government.
Mike, when he says in the speech, we're in a much better place now, that was the kicker to his marijuana insert to the speech, if you will. How did you read that? Did he mean simply because we as a state passed the referendum since last year, or that was just taking some, Pangloss and trying to put a nice face on really a blemish?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little bit of both, Charlie. I mean, it's definitely him putting a shine on something that's been a bit of a annoyance for the governor over the last 2 months. But listen, I mean, the state still passed a referendum. The legislature will get these laws figured out with the governor at some point. Obviously, you would think sooner rather than later. And the one thing to point out, too, which is a big thing for Murphy, is that he ran not just on marijuana legalization, but this idea that it was a social justice issue.
Right.
Right. And New Jersey's number 13, and the other 12 states that came before, there was talk about arrests and the racial disparity. But really, if you saw the commercials, there was a lot about economic benefits, tax revenue, things like that. Think about the limited advertising we saw in this referendum campaign. Economic benefits, tax revenue was really an afterthought. So for somebody like Murphy, who, again, is running on these progressive ideas, for marijuana legalization to be even at the point that we're at the finish line based on social justice is a pretty big win for him, I think.
Good. Now, I have one other final question about this. What about the question of selling to people from out of state? Has that been resolved, or is that still one of the open-ended, thorny questions here?
No, that's always been the same going on in New Jersey and really any other state. I mean, part of the benefit for New Jersey doing this is the tourism industry, right? I mean, I live down near the Jersey Shore. How many times you get stuck in traffic over the summer? All these cars from New York and Pennsylvania coming in, clogging up the Parkway and the Turnpike. And I think part of that is the idea that people are going to look at New Jersey as a place you go. Like, listen, not only do I get to go to the beach, I get to go to a dispensary and buy, an edible I've never tried before, or I can buy a pre-rolled joint or whatever the case might be. I mean, New Jersey already has a tourism market. I mean, I spent time in Colorado a couple of years ago, and there is a whole niche industry based around marijuana tourism. And I think you can start seeing that around here too.
I guess what I was talking about is the kind of people coming over, the cross-border buyers, people from Pennsylvania driving over to Trenton and then going back home back to a state where it's not legal.
Yeah, sure. Your day trippers. Yeah.
Yeah, I see it in Trenton all the time. I mean, how are they going to enforce that? And I mean, we got the question of federal laws. I mean, that still has to be ironed out, all of that, or is that still?
I think the enforcement and the actual day-to-day operation is going to have to be ironed out. But the law is pretty specific. If you carry drugs across state lines, you're drug trafficking, period, straight up. Until the federal government clears that up, that's going to be the case. Now, there are ways that you get around that, right? So you could come to New Jersey, go over the Ben Franklin Bridge, come to New Jersey, buy an ounce, go to your friend's house in Cherry Hill, and light up to your heart's content. That's definitely a possibility. But you got to remember too, part of this legal weed, this cannabis industry, there's this idea of consumption lounges they call, and New Jersey's pretty unique because other states really took a while before they got used to this idea of consumption lounges. And what that is basically, imagine you walk into a dispensary and then there's another door where you have to go in, probably another person checking your ID, whatever the case might be, and you go in there, and that's where you can consume the marijuana. You look at other states that have done this, it really took them years before they realized, hey, listen, the way our laws work, you really can't consume the marijuana anywhere. You can buy it, but unless you're going to consume it in your car, and nobody wants that to happen, you really need to give people a place where they can do this.
Right.
So that's where these consumption lounges come into place. So you could have somebody come over the Ben Franklin Bridge, go to the dispensary, wherever that might be, in Camden and Trenton, something like that, and then go next door to the consumption lounge. And you would hope let the effects wear off before they get back in the car, or have somebody drive them to go back home.
Another issue. Absolutely.
Another issue that really hasn't been resolved yet.
Awesome. Well, I guess my last question is, so what happens like right now if somebody wanted to smoke marijuana right now? What happened in New Jersey? What?
It's sort of a gray area, Ashley, right? So it is illegal. It is technically illegal. When we voted on this ballot measure, the way it was written was that it would be lawful and subject to regulation. And as a constitutional law scholar, I know said that end is very important. It's like the 2 nuclear keys you need in order to launch the bombs. You need both of them for it to work. So basically, you could get arrested. You could get arrested for marijuana possession, for use, whatever the case, whatever situation you find yourselves in. Obviously, there's numbers here and there about how much you have on you. What is different is that the Attorney General, Gerber Graywall, has chimed in and told prosecutors to dismiss cases, or at the very least delay them until after this all gets figured out. But you got to remember, the Attorney General has some pretty strong power here. It took him a month before he told these prosecutors to stop prosecutions. And there is still the idea that police departments under his watch are going to arrest people for something that could be legal in a matter of days, hours, really all it takes is the governor's signature, right? So there is a little bit of a gray area. The thing that I've essentially come around to is that you could get arrested for it if you have a particularly a cop following the letter of the law, and the Attorney General has told them to practice broad discretion. But when you get to the court system, it's probably more likely that things will go away or be at least eased up until this is all figured out.
So there's no don't ask, don't tell policy coming from high above here. It's sort of sounds like a patchwork of enforcement.
Sure. Well, I go back to something the Attorney General said, right? The Attorney General said he's not going to say anything to the police departments until after the governor's signature. But he has said, as always, we always tell police officers to use broad discretion. Now, broad discretion is kind of more of a fantasy than a reality, because this is a state that in 2017 arrested 34,000 people for marijuana possession. And those arrests have continued since then. We've had cases in the last 2 months of people getting arrested, or in the lead up to Election Day getting arrested for this. So just simply saying, well, you have the discretion to do what you want isn't really going to cut it, I think.
All right. Thanks a lot, Mike. There was a lot of stuff there. Great.
Great talking to you guys.
Thank you. Well, all right. Charlie, any final thoughts here? Anything that stood out that we haven't talked about? Maybe his goals moving forward that we didn't really break down?
Well,
minimums kind of stood out to me. Kind of talking about social justice there with Mike Davis. He basically told the legislature, hey, we want to, for social justice reasons, we want to get rid of these mandatory minimums. That this bill has been stalled in the legislature because Senator Nick Sacco put in a clause there to help for official misconduct in there, which he does not want. Sorry, go ahead.
It has a particular personal reason for that, and then he's gumming it up because of that family tie, or I believe it's his partner's son. I believe. Right. This one specific going to bat for one family member or friend is, holding up the fate of thousands of mostly low income, middle, and predominantly African American New Jerseyans. I think is a disgrace, and I think that would be. I think Murphy's right. I think if they were able to get that across the finish line, that would be a major social justice win. I remember going back to the Christie Whitman days. This was mandatory minimums was all the rage. This was the Republican Party rage. This was part of the get tough on crime, the 3 strikes you're out mentality that gave us these laws. So this would be coming full circle and it would be a big advance. I also thought Scott Fallon's point is an excellent one, and it's just right in front of me, and I hope to frankly borrow it in my column. But the point is, and it's a good one, is that, he Murphy no longer has the crutch and assistance of the Trump administration. He got some assistance from Trump because he refused to kick him in the shins, like, say, Andrew Cuomo did all through the year. They didn't fight. He actually was diplomatic with him, so he got that benefit. But he can't really use him as a source of blame going forward. I think that's Scott's point, and I think that is a very big issue. He has a team player now, the person he endorsed for president, Joe Biden, at the helm. And I think that's going to be a real challenge for him if this thing trundles out, this thing being vaccinations, really kind of trundles out slowly, and and the public's expectations are not met in a timely fashion.
Yeah, that was a great point. I guess one of my final thoughts, I cover housing issues in New Jersey. So Murphy's speaking about the protections in place for people who haven't been able to afford their rent or are afraid or can't afford their mortgage. He urged the legislature to pass the People's Bill, which is a bill that's gone through many iterations and has been stalled in the legislature for, maybe 6 months or so. That would basically really codify a foreclosure moratorium, making it so if you don't pay your mortgage, everything's due at the end. Right now, it's kind of just like a deal between the banks. And it would also say that landlords and renters have to come to a deal where they'll pay back their missed payments over a certain period of time. Because right now, there's a protection period, but as soon as it goes away, when people can't be evicted, when that protective period is gone, we don't know what's going to happen. There are hundreds of thousands of New Jerseyans who are behind on their rent. So he was bragging about some, or really talking up some of his programs that he said helped 20,000 people. The last census data I saw, more than 300,000 households are behind on rent. So we're not nearly close enough to helping all those people at this point.
Do you see that being a political problem for him as well? I mean, that's enough of a I'm thinking out loud. It could be. I mean, these are people who are going to be potentially thrown out of their apartments in the middle of a campaign year. Yeah, I guess that could be and a good share of them are already in his base.
Yeah, hopefully. So we did get a lot of money from the federal stimulus. We're hoping to get, I think it's a little more than $500 million, around 600 million. So hopefully that will go out in terms of rent relief, and we'll distribute that. There's been some success with a lottery program. About 15,000 families got help. But then we also rolled out this program to help small landlords. It did not go as planned. They had a bucket of 25 million. Eventually had to cut it all the way down to 5 million because not enough people applied. People had issues when they were applying, weren't getting approved. So hopefully this huge chunk of money will go out to people and they need it. It won't be held up with red tape or issues rolling out the programs. So I'll be really paying attention to that. And if anybody is going through hardships, please reach out to me, and I'd love to hear your story. Is there anything else we didn't talk about, Charlie, that you want to end on?
I don't know. We covered a lot of territory there, dude. I mean, we talked about the veterans home. Scott talked about that, and he's right about that. He's not going to bring that up. This is not a chance. This is his, wish list. This is his making his best presentation. It's not a place for confessional, soul searching, being candid about the problems in your administration. You're here to make a sales pitch. So one thing I thought was also interesting, there's very little mention of immigrants. I mean, when he ran as a candidate in 2017, he made a stir by saying he wants to turn New Jersey into a sanctuary state. And now we come full circle, and there's just I think it was mentioned once, the word immigrant. And I'm a little surprised at that. And I am surprised, given the progressive sheen that he's trying to put on his reputation and his record. But I know that there are people on the more conservative wing of the party who, the more business-oriented wing of the party, thought that that was a colossal mistake that Murphy made in 2017, and it may have hurt his totals. And a lot of people thought that, yeah, he had a 13-point win in 2017 when it should have been more up in the 20s and higher, given the lack of competition that he had. And some people feel that he kind of dampened some moderate support by being too far to the left on immigration. So he seems to be staying away from that issue. And I don't know whether that has something to do with the whole issue of the county jails in Bergen and Hudson County being in Essex, or Democratic strongholds where they've been leasing out space to the federal government to detain undocumented immigrants and refugees. And it's created a big explosive and a lot of friction in those counties. So maybe that's a nod to them as well. I don't know. It just seems odd that he didn't really touch on that on an issue he spoke so passionately about in the past.
That's an interesting point. Yeah. Well, thank you guys for watching Speech with us and listening to all of our analysis.
We should do this every day, Ashley, right?
We're just doing it now. Well, this is USA Today Network, New Jersey. I'm Ashley Balzerzak with Charlie Style. Thanks so much.
Take care now.